Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'chelon shehakol niv'borei. L'chaim, everybody.
Amen. L'chaim.
L'chaim. The life. And life is when you start off the week learning the parsha of the week. That's real life. So l'chaim to one and all. And together with bringing life to ourselves, may our learning bring life to our brothers and sisters in the land of Israel, those that are guarding our brothers and sisters and protecting them. Just this afternoon, I got notification that a first cousin was actually killed in one of the border kibbutzim, the one that had with the 40 kids. He was in that kibbutz and was murdered there. Just found out this afternoon. So Le'ili Nishmas, for his neshama. Oh, right. Le'ili Nishmas, his neshama. Avram Avi Ben Velvel. He's my mother's brother's son. Truth is, I haven't seen him for over 50 years. Didn't really have anything to do with him for over 50 years, to be quite frank. But that doesn't matter. For his neshama, may his neshama, may his neshama go from strength to strength. And may all those that need to be released should be released and come. Oh, yeah. Amen. And all those that need a refuah shlema have a speedy recovery. And all of those souls. L'chaim. L'chaim, l'chaim.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Shalom.
So we're going to learn. And by learning, we get strengthened. And we don't just ourselves get strengthened, but since Am Yisrael is like one body, so it's the entirety of Am Yisrael. Right? The truth is, when you think about it, it's very simple. One body, if you strengthen one part of the body, it gives strength to the entire body, right? One day you do your abs, another day you do your upper body, another day you do your lower body, right? But it all strengthens the entire body. So we strengthen a part of us, we strengthen all of us, the entirety of the Jewish people. So with that in mind, l'chaim, l'chaim. So this week's parsha, we learn about Noach, Noah in English and Noach in Hebrew. Amen. The hero who built the ark that saved humanity from the flood, whatever was left of humanity, right? Noach spent 120 years to build it. And sadly, he didn't get anybody to repent, to do tshuva. That's why he spent such a long time, in order to have an effect on his generation. Oh, thank you. Thank you. So remind me, I have to get you a fob so you can get in with a fob. Okay, and you also, you don't have one? You don't have, huh?
That's a new thing.
Not a new thing, but anyways.
For Shabbos also?
Shabbos, you don't use a fob.
You can't use.
No. No. All right.
I encourage, this is my friend Rena to come.
Hello,
here.
Rena.
She's
Welcome. Thank you
interested
for
in the
coming.
parsha.
Thank you for coming. Oh, Sharon. Okay. So his efforts failed. So the Torah describes him in a peculiar manner. Let us share the screen here.
You're so technically advanced, Rabbi.
Herschel, I want to tell you I'm not sharing the podium with you right now. Maybe later, but not right now. Okay.
A compliment.
I thank you, as I said. Okay.
A lot of people at home.
Okay, so this week's parsha begins. It begins with a statement that Noach ish tzadik tamim haya b'deirayisav. Noach was a righteous man. He was perfect in his generation. Now, what's peculiar about this? Anybody?
His generation.
Oh, in his generation. What do you mean in his generation? Just say he was a perfect, righteous person. What does it mean in his generation? So, of course, he lived in his generation. So, what do you mean in his generation as opposed to someone else's? What does that mean? So, if we take a careful look, or Rashi took a careful look at this, and he says the following: he was considered righteous relative to his generation. However, had he lived in the generation of Abraham, he would not have been considered of any importance. He wouldn't be considered of any importance. In other words, he was only considered righteous because he had lived when he lived. Had he lived in the generation of Abraham, he would not have been considered righteous. Okay, so you answered a question, but this opens up more questions. Why not? Why wouldn't he be considered righteous in the generation of Abraham? What was it about him that it was only in his particular time he's righteous, right? And but if in Abraham's time it's not. Moreover, do you know the real truth? They overlapped. You know how many years they overlapped? Anybody?
Abraham
And Noah overlapped
their lifespans.
their lifespan, exactly.
Meaning they lived at the same time.
Abraham was 58 years old when Noah passed away. That means for 58 years, Noah was alive in Abraham's generation. Or maybe you want to say that Abraham was alive in Noah's generation. But the fact is that they overlapped, right? And what happened by the age of 58? Where was Abraham at that time?
Aram.
Well, I don't mean, I'm sorry, not physically. Where was he spiritually? Anybody?
He was still Abram.
Where was he spiritually? No, he was already devoted to God. He was already devoted to God. So what does it mean in his generation that that's when he was righteous? They overlapped. So why couldn't it be that he was in his generation also righteous? We need to understand that. And what precludes Noah in his greatness, if he's righteous, then what was the problem in his generation that he wasn't, that in Abraham's generation he wasn't? So if we look a little closer at the wording of Rashi, it might sound, what are we doing over here? What's Rashi doing? Comparing Noah to Abraham. At first glance, that's what you would think, right? In other words, Noah was great, but if you put him in Abraham's generation, then he wasn't. But that's not the truth. That's not what it's doing. It's not making a comparison. Actually, what Rashi is doing is comparing not Noah to Abraham, but Noah to Abraham's generation, because that's what it says, right? Go back a moment. Right, relative to his generation. However, had he been in the generation of Abraham, so not comparing Noah to Abraham, he's comparing the two generations to each other. That he wouldn't have been compared to anything. Is that clear? Right? Yet, they lived alongside each other. So what defines a generation? When did Noah's generation end? When did Abraham's generation begin?
Noah's generation ended at the flood. They all died.
Well, he didn't die.
No, outside of that.
I know, but does that mean after that, he's no longer his generation? Is that what it means? Right? So
It's got to be people around to their generation. Everyone died.
okay, so well, afterwards it took some time to repopulate the earth, of course, it took time, but it did happen, right? So let's remain focused where we are, and we can get to other issues later. Okay, thank you. So the key over here for us to appreciate is as follows. At 58 years old, it was not yet Abraham's generation. So when Noah passed away, Abraham lived in Noah's generation. Only sometime thereafter, which we'll now go into, it became Abraham's generation. Okay? Is that clear? When? We're going to get there. I didn't explain what. When, even though Abraham was already a devotee to God at 58 years old, we don't call it Abraham's generation at that time. It was Noah's generation when he passed away. When does it become Abraham's generation? We'll see. It wasn't yet. What defines it's your generation? We'll see what that means, right? In other words, even though they overlapped, it was Noah's generation. It wasn't yet Abraham's time, even though Abraham was a devotee to God already, right? So we have to understand what distinguishes this generation from that generation, right? Just like you have to understand what distinguishes one people from another people, right? We see what's going on in Israel today, right? Every Jew wants to help another Jew and be there for another Jew. In 45 minutes, there were 6,000 families in the South that needed homes. That in 45 minutes, they got housed. No one wants the Palestinians, right? Different kind of people, different generations, different kind of peoples, and so on, right? Even each person to another person, everybody's different. So you have to know what's the uniqueness, this one, that one. So here, what we want to know, what defines a generation of Noah versus what defines a generation of Abraham. What makes it his generation? So to do that, we got to start from the beginning. When's the beginning? Adam and Eve. Right? That's pretty much the beginning, right? Humanity. Adam and Chava, they're directly from God. They knew God. They knew the basic teachings. They were in Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. They had no self-awareness until they ate from the tree of knowledge and good and evil. They only had God awareness. That's all they had. That's why they were naked. They were, and there was nothing to be bashful about, because in God's awareness, there is nothing to be bashful. Once you have self-awareness, there's a sense of me, and there's God. There's a separation. That's different, right? So they believed. They had fundamental laws after they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, fundamental laws that they had to keep. What were the fundamental laws? God gave Adam 6 commandments: prohibition against idolatry, blasphemy, murder, incest and adultery, theft, and the commandment to establish laws of courts of justice.
basic Noahide laws.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Adam transmitted these to his descendants, who taught them to their descendants until they reached Noah. As the Midrash tells us, and God, Adam transmitted these teachings to Enoch, or Chanoch, and Chanoch transmitted him to Mr. Shalach. Mr. Shalach transmitted him to Noah. So there's only 3 primary teachers here that taught the tradition of God, the mitzvahs that God commanded to Adam. It's only 3 primary teachers. And you know how long of a span of time? Any guess?
From where to where?
From the beginning of Adam until Noah. 1,600 years. That's a long time. 1,600 years and the 3 primary teachers, right? How strong will the message be? Sorry, Sharon? Well, they lived long, so it wasn't that many generations, right? Till Noah was 10 generations, right? But 1,600 years, right?
Methuselah lived over 900 years.
969, right? Why were there so few teachers? Because there were so few people interested to learn. They rejected the teachings. Even at that time, even Adam lived to 930, and his generation, right? There were people who became idolaters already while he was alive. What was the idolatry? It was a very soft and light idea. What was it? Enoch, right? Chanoch even himself believed in God, but he also believed that God gave over certain authority to other celestial beings. Yeah. They should probably Jason. To the sun, to the moon, to others. He delegated authority, like a CEO of a corporation. CEO of a corporation doesn't do bathrooms, right? He delegates it, correct?
You mean because the sun was shining on the moon?
Well, no, because they're greater creations, and then, so God gave over. Then came the pagan prophets, and they began to teach that certain stars wanted that we should worship them. So he made a likeness. In other words, paganism didn't began with believing in God, but that God gave certain powers over to celestial beings, right? So you have there's God Almighty, but then, it's like you're when you're sitting at someone's Shabbos table, and he has the butler giving you the wine, right? The wine belongs to the host. But who do you say thank you to? To the butler, right? Because when the butler will give you, and you say thank you, maybe he'll give you a little more. So that's what people thought. I'm going to say thank you to the sun, so maybe the sun will shine more upon me, right? Knowing, though, just as the butler is not independent of the host, because it belongs to the host ultimately, right? So that's what initially people believed. They believed in God. But then they said, well, these celestial beings, there came pagan prophets and said, they want to be worshipped, but we need something down here, a likeness of them. So they made things carved out of stone, carved out of wood, that had a likened image to those celestial beings, right? And only because it represented them, not that because they thought there was anything in the stone and in the wood. They served They only use that as like, sometimes we're physical people. We need that. And they praised the celestial beings. But then many generations passed. And then finally, what was it? Actually, the carved out stone and the carved out wood became their deity. That's how idolatry began. Is that clear? So now, Abraham is born in the year 1948. 1948, Abraham is born. Huh? 1948, he's born. Huh? No.
Born 1940.
No, since creation. Since creation.
Since creation.
Yeah.
Since creation.
Since creation. Abraham is born. Right? There were very few believers at that time. Noah, his son Shem, the descendant of Shem is Aver, and there was just very few. The rest were oblivious of God. Take a message to him. I'll call him back later. I have a bunch of characters over here.
They're very patient.
All right. Says Maimonides, God the eternal rock was not recognized or known by anyone worldwide, with a few exceptions such as Chanaich, Mrs. Shalach, Nayach, Shem, and Aver. The world continued the way until the pillar of the world, Patriarch Abraham, was born. So he is the first to change the equation. Although several people in Israel still knew about God, because that's where Shem and Aver were, they were, right? But where was Abraham at that time? In Mesopotamia. Can anybody say that word, Mesopotamia? All right, look at that. Psh, yeah, a real mess. Iraq, Iran. Right. There in Mesopotamia, no one knew about God. And that's where Abraham was born, and that's where he was raised. So he had no one to teach him. He had no one to ask. He wasn't in Israel at the time. So he had to find God on his own, as Maimonides explains. After the mighty one was weaned, that's referring to Abraham, began to explore and think. Though he was a child, he began to think day and night, wondering, how can the sphere revolve continually without anyone controlling it? Who causes it to rotate? It cannot turn itself. He had no teacher, nor was there anyone to inform him. He was mired in Ur-Kasdim, Mesopotamia, among foolish idolaters. His father and mother and all other people around him were idol worshippers. And at this point, idol worship means literally the stone and the wood. They thought that was the idol. That was what they worshiped. Not that even represented celestial beings. Not that celestial beings are ultimately in control. They're like the butlers in control by the host, by God. No, at this point, that was all forgotten. He would worship with them. However, his heart was exploring and gaining understanding. So Abraham began to cast about an all-powerful God. Where did the luminaries come from? So Medrash tells us further. He observed the moon. Her light illuminated the night, shining from one end of the world to the other. And her retinue of glistening stars was enormous in number. He told himself, this is God. And he worshiped the moon all night. Then in the morning, he observed the rising sun's rays. As its light conquered the skies, the moon rapidly faded, weakening her strength. He told himself, the moon's light is but a reflection of the sun. Indeed, the entire world is sustained by the sun's radiance. He then worshipped the sun the entire day. As evening fell, the sun set. Its strength steadily weakened until the moon, stars, and the planets emerged. He declared there must be a master, a God, over all of these. He did it without guidance, without direction. As the Rambam says, Maimonides, ultimately he mastered the path of truth and understood right from wrong. Through his accurate comprehension, he realized that there's one God who controls the sphere, who created everything, and there's no other God in all of existence. And he knew that all of humanity had erred. So he saw, as we all see sometimes, something that is primary mover, but it's only primary by the day. And then there's a primary mover by night, which he saw that, so this is a piece of the puzzle, this is a piece of the puzzle. There must be something greater than is not finite, not tangible. And it took him 37 years to finally master it. When he first started, he was a child. And then 37 years, he finally mastered it. And once he mastered and understood the truth that he came to on his own, he did not want to keep this gift for himself. What did he want to do? Share, exactly. He wanted to share it. So what did he do? He traveled all over Mesopotamia. Again, how do you say that? You guys are great. All right. Abraham was 40 years.
The Euphrates and the Tigris.
Yes. Abraham was 40 years old when he became aware of his creator, and I was fully aware, right? When he recognized and knew him, he began to formulate replies to his inhabitants in Ur Kasdim and to debate with them, telling them that they were not following the proper path. He shattered their idols and began to debate and explain to the people of Mesopotamia that it is only proper to serve the God of the universe. To him alone it is fitting to bow, sacrifice, and offer libations so that the people of the future generation should recognize him. Conversely, it is fitting to destroy and break all of the idols to prevent others from making the same error as those who thought there was no other God besides these idols. So he went on a crusade, explaining monotheism, answering all the challenges, public debates, showing the folly of idolatry. It got him in some kind of trouble with, Nimrod and other things, right? But he met the challenge. Yet, remember, if you remember, not that long ago, we had a question. What defines his generation versus Noah's generation? Just like people, no two people are alike. What defines one person over a different another person? No two nations are alike, right? What is the character difference between them? So here we want to know what defines Noah, who led his generation, versus Abraham, which led his generations, right? Yet at this point, Abraham did not yet surpass Noah. And that's why at this point, right, Abraham and Noah both taught. The difference is Abraham taught masses and Noah more individuals. But they were at the same point. And therefore they were sort of equal at that point in time. And this is while Noah's alive, Abraham's doing his thing. He didn't carve out yet, Abraham, his uniqueness. But time progressed. Now let's see what happened next. Avram, he moves out from Mesopotamia and he goes to Haran. And when he was 52 years old, 6 years before Noah's passing, right? Because Noah passed away after 58 years of Abraham's life, right? And there, for 23 years, he's there, and during that time, when Noah passed away, he's more successful there. He converted many people to monotheism. And then finally, at 75 years old, that's when God reveals himself to Abraham. And what does he tell him? Where should he go? Lech lecha. That's right. 75 years old. He's already passed away almost 20 years, 18 years. Noah has passed away. And this is when his real life work begins, when God commands him, Lech lecha, go from where you are, go to now create your generation, your unique stamp, your unique quality that will define you differently than the previous generation of Noah.
Did they know each other?
I mean, they knew of each other, but didn't know, but no. They didn't study this, no. No. So what was it? Abraham was devoted beforehand, right? 75 years old. Remember, at 40, he already completed. It's 35 years. From 40 to 75 is 35 years. From a child to 40 is when he developed himself in his path about God. At 40, now he's bringing out to the world, first Mesopotamia, then in Haran, right? Which is not that far from there, actually. In any case, but he doesn't emerge in his uniqueness at that time. What was the difference? Before that, his effect on people wasn't a lasting effect. Their loyalty was fickle. People were inspired, but then they dropped out. It didn't last to the next generation or the following generation. It wasn't real. It's only when he comes to Israel, when God commands him, Lech Lecha, and he comes to Israel, that now what he's doing is taking teachings that were abstract before, theoretical, but now what he's doing is taking it from here and planting it into the heart and making it real for people, embedded deep into their heart, right? That they will come not only to be aware of God. See, you can be aware of God. It can be very abstract, theoretical, and it remains there. And what happens when it remains there? It's not real, and it's not lasting. And that's why those people that he inspired and influenced, it didn't remain with them or with the following generation, because he wasn't bringing it home into the heart. When he comes to Israel, Lech Lecha gives him now much greater capability that he's able to bring it home to the people. As see Rambam, he came to the land of Canaan proclaiming God's existence, as the passage says, and he called there on the name of God, the eternal God. The people would gather around him and ask about his statements. He would explain to each according to their understanding until they turned to the path of truth. Ultimately, thousands and myriads gathered around him. These are the men of the house of Abraham, in whose hearts he implanted this critical concept. But he implanted in their hearts. That's the key over here. Not just, and that's now when they become Abraham's people. This now becomes his what?
Mission.
His generation. Oh, someone's paying attention. Can you please come back?
Yes, sure.
You can bring him along, but yeah, come back. Now this becomes his generation, right? He's implanting. In other words, he brings it deeply into them that it should be embedded in part of them. This is this week's Torah, this week's Sicha from the Rebbe. The Rebbe explains in this week's Sicha, the Rebbe explains. Their acceptance of God was not just a product of Abraham's defeating them in a debate with resounding arguments. It was not even just because they agreed with Abraham's intellectual explanation and proofs. Wow. In that case, it would mean that their acceptance of God was foreign to them, something Abraham injected into them. Instead, he planted the recognition and the knowledge of God in their hearts. It became their recognition as it was Abraham's recognitions. Their minds embraced the truth of God. It was that point. It was appropriate to call them the generation of Abraham because, like Abraham, they were permeated with the recognition of God. This is his stamp. This is his uniqueness, right? Compared to this generation, Noah could not have an effect. Because Noah, it was an intellectual pursuit. It was an abstract idea, right? There is a God. And, he's building an ark. And for 120 years, he's telling them that there is a God, but it's very abstract. It's not something that they had any ownership, anything that was personalized, because he didn't have it so strong. So he wasn't able to give it to them. Abraham also was the same initially as he was at the beginning, right? It's also the same. But now he takes it to the next step. He makes it something more real for them, personalized for them. He brings it into their heart that they have ownership over it, that it's their feelings. It's not, right? Like sometimes you can be very inspired by something, right? But then how often does it happen that after being inspired, we lose it? Why? Because we were inspired intellectually and maybe even emotionally, but we didn't own it. We didn't ourselves kind of make it heartfelt for ourselves and make it something, it's mine. That's what Abraham did. Right? That sound good?
Well, how did you do that, Rabbi? By inviting them into this tent? We opened up like all the tents of this tent. That's how we inspired them.
You know what? I didn't even think about that, but probably. Yeah. In other words, give them some food, make them feel comfortable. So when they're emotionally comfortable, right? And then when you teach, then the teachings, they can be comfortable with the teachings, that they can then, but think about it. When you debate with somebody, you may have won the debate, but you might have lost the person, right? Because in the end, where does a person live? Yeah, right, in your heart. In other words, your feelings are. So intellectually, you may have won the argument, but if you didn't get to the heart of the person, right? So what's going to happen? That intellectual argument today is wonderful, but tomorrow you'll have an argument back on it, right? And it's not going to last. But if you can get to the heart, so like Abraham did, he had the open tent and he invited people in, he fed them, took care of them, and tried to inspire them with Hashem. Yeah, absolutely. So being that he was able to make them comfortable emotionally, that allowed them now to be comfortable with the God, the G word, right? But to be comfortable with that emotionally. That makes sense? Yeah? Makes sense?
It makes dollars.
Even more than sense, huh? Yeah. Yeah, we're good, everybody? All right. So, yet, Abraham indeed achieved a lot more than Noah. No question. He managed to make God more real for the people, and they embraced God with their hearts, but yet, that wasn't sufficient. Is that when we became a people? No. Why not? If you had that influence, because that influence too waned. It's not enough. It's not enough.
charismatic, and once the character is gone. this is the-
Charismatic once the character is gone. Although, remember what he did, he gave them the intellectual fodder, but he made it real for them, so then it was theirs. But that wasn't sufficient. He wasn't able to make Judaism enduring, and therefore from him does not come, from him is the first Jew, but from him doesn't come Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael is not coming from him, right, Sharon? Not coming from him. Huh? Monotheism. The notion, right, of absolutely, but it's not coming from him. So why isn't it coming from him?
Come from him, it's got to come from me.
No,
Yeah, he didn't have a lot of sons that was gonna, and that one son.
yeah, but if he was able to inspire the people and to create a nation, so why does a nation have to come from 12 sons of Yaakov? You're talking about it in historical. We're talking about it in the concept of the idea. Well, it could come from one person, a nation, right? From one person, a nation can come. That person is able to create a collective of the people, right? But it wasn't Abraham that did it. Ultimately, it's not even Jacob and his 12 sons that did it. It was only when they went down into Egypt, right? And it was Moses that did it. It was Moses that did it. Exactly. So there's something missing here. Oh, 1 second. I want to, please, I want you to follow the yellow brick road, right? Follow the question and the logic over here and the reasoning that, right? We're saying now Abraham did something remarkable. His generation was something that Noah couldn't accomplish. Noah was just the mind. And Abraham was that also. And they shared that together in the same 58 years. And therefore God says to him, no, you have to create your own generation. What's going to be your generation that you're going to now make, not just take a theory, abstract idea of God, right, and teach it. You got to bring it into the heart and make it real, make it something that's meaningful to the individuals. Oh, that creates his generation. Noah could not compete with that. That's why in his generation, he's nothing. Yet, what are we saying now? What do we see? That not from Abraham comes the Jewish people. He's the first Jew. Noah is not. True. So he brought something more personalized and more real, but he doesn't create the nation. Because to create the nation, you need something more. That's not enough. That's the point.
A vision, sort of.
Huh?
A vision,
More,
tangible.
more.
Yeah, more.
Jump forward a few years.
Well, let's take a look.
Save and Nishima, we will do, and then we will listen.
Okay.
Doing.
So let's take a look over here. Maimonides.
So Noah wasn't a Jew.
No.
So what defined him as a Jew? Abraham.
His recognition of God, that he brought it to the masses, but brought not just a concept of just an idea, but to make that idea personal, right? That's what feelings are. My feelings, your feelings, my idea could be your idea equally, but my feelings, I have to feel for it, right? Personally, that what makes something personal, right? When you have an abstract idea about something, not very personal.
I had an argument today with a black lady from Africa. She said that the Jewish people, they're not a nation, they're a religion.
Whatever.
So
Doesn't know what.
so
We're not a nation. We're not a religion. We're a people.
So
We're a people.
So he was Jewish because he believed in God. Is that why?
Well, Noah also believed in God,
No, but I mean,
right?
he was.
But he was, what made him the first Jew is not just because he believed in God, because those who believed before, but that he took the message and brought it to the people. Noah didn't take the message to the people. He built an ark, and if you wanted to come discuss with him, he will have a debate and a discussion with you, and that God's going to bring a flood. God's upset with his creations, and you got to repent. But he didn't go out to seek to help people, right? He didn't do that because it was all theoretical. It was all philosophical, right? Abraham, it was heartfelt. When? In his generation. When was his generation? Lech lecha, 75 years old. Then God tells him, go to Israel. Goes to Israel. Now he's got a new path on how he's bringing it into a greater way than he did previously.
But Abraham also got that specific blessing that from him would spring forth a specific nation.
Right, but it's not from him, the nation. It will come from his descendants, but not from him. As opposed to Moses, it came from Moses, right? So we need to understand that. What we get to embrace God. Okay, let's understand that. Okay, I'm going to ask now, because we're short on time, I didn't realize the time, that, listen quicker. All right. All right, text number 9. Maimonides says, out of love for us and to uphold the oath God made to Abraham, our patriarch, God designated Moses, our teacher, the master of all prophets, and sent him to redeem the Jews. After Moses, our teacher, prophesied, and God chose Israel as his inheritance, he crowned them with the mitzvahs and taught them to serve him, teaching them the rules prescribed for idol worshippers and those who stray after him. So, the problem with Noah and actually Abraham is that their relationship with God was down up. It came from them. Why does it come from you? What defines a human being? Intelligence and emotions. So they understood, and Abraham even brought it further. There was a deep feeling of bond and connection, but it all came from them. From within. But now, God says at Sinai, the orientation needs to change. It needs to be up, down. In other words, God showed himself to us, and we have to embrace God, not on our terms. What our terms means, you understand, okay? And from that appreciation brings you to an emotional bond. No, we need now to do it up, down, on God's terms. What does that mean on God's terms? Anybody? Huh? Right?
He gave the commandments.
So let's see what the Rebbe says in the Sikha. We must know that we can't rely on ourselves or build our relationship with God on our cognition. Our minds can't be only the only bulwark against the idol worship, nor can their own can they be our only reason to embrace and serve God. Our mind understands the truth, and now I'm going to serve God because this is the truth. That's what Abraham did, and that's what Noah did. Right? To shield them from the sin of idol worship, or our ancestors, required a key factor. Out of love for us, God designated Moses, our teacher, the master of all prophets, and sent him to redeem the Jews. He crowned them with mitzvahs and taught them how to serve him. This means that they served God because God had commanded them to. It's coming from God. God, that's what he wants. That's what he desires. That's what he asks of us. Not only was there an acknowledgement of God inspired by God, but so was their worship of God. Unlike in Abraham's day, when they worshiped God because they learned that God was the only worthy thing to worship and that it was proper to prostrate before him. offer sacrifice and pour libations to him. The secret of Jewish endurance is to know that we worship God because he instructed it when he prophesied to Moses and taught us how to serve him. In other words, we are now serving him on God's terms. It's his idea. It's his perspective, right? In other words, we're doing it ultimately out of what? Faith, because God said so. We're transcending our logic, transcending our feelings, and we're doing it because this is what God wants. Our knowledge of God doesn't suffice. Inasmuch our convictions are compelled by our intelligence, we can only reach a dimension of God that extends downward to relate to us, the element of God that extends downward to become a primordial cause of all existence. However, our minds can't grasp or reach the pinnacle of godliness that transcends any form associated with creation. This can only be embraced with faith, because faith transcends intelligence. Human intelligence is a created finite being and is therefore incapable of utter dissociation from existence. It is only God's commandment to us to accept his transcendental reality on faith that empowers us to embrace this truth, namely that God is the only real existence and nothing can exist without him.
Rabbi,
So let's understand.
I have a question, sorry. Apart from having the belief in Hashem, what about the other factors that encourage us to do so, like the miracles, the physical miracles?
We'll get there. So it comes out like this. In our connection to God, there's 3 steps. There's the Noah step, the Abraham step, and the Moses step. Right? First step is an awareness. An awareness. What's the awareness? Awareness of the truth of God. When I was in high school and I had a friend who was religious, and he would debate with me about God and about Judaism being the truth. It was an awareness. That was the first stage, right? It was all philosophical. It was nothing emotional, right? Then I went to yeshiva and I owned it more. That philosophy then became more something, right? But it wasn't really faith-based. It was something more intellectual that I owned, that I came to recognize that this is the truth. Because I came to recognize its truth. You following? Yeah? Right? And that's the process that we have to come to. But then we have to come to a place after that. And that's when I came to Chabad, to the Rebbe, that we have to recognize that whatever I understand and feel is just what I understand and feel. And that's limited. God is not based on that. And therefore my commitment and connection should not be based on that. I have to come to the 3rd rung of the ladder that transcends my intelligence. What it tells me that, oh, this makes sense, and therefore I'm committed. It transcends even my feelings. And that's called a leap of faith. And that's how we need to climb. Now, when we say a leap of faith over here, does it mean that you don't understand and you don't feel? You do. But at some point, there's something that you recognize, that a connection to God can't be based because only I have an awareness and I get it, and therefore I'm committed, right? And then the more I'm committed, the more it becomes part of my, inner psyche, right? It becomes a part of me. Wow. Just had an epiphany. No. There's something beyond me. and I accept it on God's terms. That's faith. Anything that I can understand, I need to understand. But come to a point, there's things that you can't understand. And you're perfectly good with that. You're perfectly good with that. Let me explain the difference in this notion today and what's going on in the world, in Israel. A lot of people are having a very difficult time. Why? Because our minds can't grasp what happened in Israel. Our hearts can't get around it. It's impossible. And therefore, for those who their life is based on that, guess what? They're really suffering now. And suffering terribly. I've spoken to several of them in the past week. And now I just realized they're not willing to transcend. They want to take everything based on their awareness and how they feel about it. Which ultimately is very self-centered humanness. But that human, but self-centered.
So these are not religious people.
Religious people,
They
yes,
are
even religious people. Religious, yes, even religious people.
This reality is so painful. Why would they think?
Oh, reality, what you perceive with your mind and what you feel in your heart. I agree with you 100%. 100% I agree with you. But that's if you remain only a descendant of Abraham. And that's why Abraham doesn't create a nation, right? He had an effect, a limited effect, because the mind and the heart have a limited effect. But faith that stems from the soul transcends that which we understand or don't understand and feel and are incapable of feeling, right? We have faith that is beyond. Faith is, you know what faith is? That when I'm seeing in Israel that the mind is telling me, where is God? Faith is telling me there's only but God. Not because I understand, not because I feel it, but my neshama knows it, that there's only but God. Not because of a logical proof, not because a miracle happened. You know, like people, there's stories there's a lot of miraculous stories that have happened, right? Yeah, but hey, does it take away from 1,500 so far? God forbid should be any more. So faith means that I'm comfortable to be in a place where the mind doesn't get it, I don't understand it, but that doesn't bother me. And I shouldn't say it doesn't bother. Of course, it bothers in the sense that, but I transcend it. And I have a sense of an assurity. Not a surety because I came to it logically. Not a surety because just I have an emotional need that it's fulfilling. An assurity because my neshama is talking. My soul is talking. And in my soul, my connection to God is not based on my perception, my awareness, or my feelings. It transcends it. It's the truth regardless what my eye sees, that there is only a reality but God, and there is only but God's goodness, not because I perceive it on my physical eyes and I'm seeing, God forbid, no, not because you're saying, oh, it's good 1,500, God forbid. That's not what it means. 1,500 that holy martyrs, including, as I mentioned at the beginning of the class, as I just found out, for some of you just came or came afterwards, that one of them is a first cousin. Oh, I really didn't know. Last time I saw him was over 50 years ago. my mother's older brother. In any case, so faith on this level is the certainty that the soul has because it's a part of God. It's not a part of God because it's logical, right? It's a part of God because it's a part of God. And therefore, the faith that we have is of a certainty of God's not just existence, but of God's goodness. And not because now I'm going to rationally explain it. No, it's not about rationally explaining it. Once you rationally explain it, you've ruined it in a sense. Because the rationality is telling you, no, 1500 is... But that's a truth that's greater than me. That's down, that's up, down. God gives that truth to me. I can't come to it on my own. He plants that in my soul. What I need to do is get attuned to my neshama. That truth is there. Not in my brain and not in my heart, but there. So, in conclusion, how can we make sure that we come out of what's going on in Israel and that we make sure that we're inoculated from the outside world's negative influence that might bring us, someone would win the argument with you that the truth of Judaism, but that doesn't mean you're going to be convinced to lead a Jewish life. And you might even know this truth and feel its truth in your heart. That's wonderful, but that's not sufficient. What defines a Jew is what happened at Mount Sinai. We got a Jewish soul. That Jewish soul has an awareness, or has a connection rather, to the divine on God's terms, not on human terms. And it's such a certainty that we have of the realness of God, the goodness of God, that therefore what that drives us to do is one thing: reflect that in my life. Reflect goodness in my life. Do more good. Change the world for good. Do another mitzvah. Not because logically of any logical argument. A logical argument actually might bring you somewhere else. Might bring you somewhere else. But because when you're attuned to the neshama is bright with godliness just because. So just do it. Just because that's who we are. And therefore, when you're attuned to that, your connection will be a divine connection. Does it mean that we don't understand and don't feel? Of course you do. The things that you need to understand and feel, you're obliged to understand. The things that you can know that are a truth, absolutely. But don't limit ourselves to the human perception, comprehension, and human feelings. We have a neshama that we can rise above. And that's this circumstance, this is what's necessary. And we see that's what's happening in Israel. The neshama of the Jewish people is on fire.
We're united.
We're united more than ever before. That we are caring for each other more than ever before, not because of a logical argument, not because, yes, it's the foe on the outside that has brought the neshama to shine. And the truth is, the real test will be when the foe from the outside will not be, what's pushing us, but we will ourselves be pushed by that truth because we're attuned to the neshama, to our soul. And that soul, the truth is that Am Yisrael Chai, that Am Yisrael is a unique nation, and we see that how each one is being cared for. My nephew is in the Maglan. He's in the reservist, but he's in Maglan. He right now who goes into is the regular army, goes in first, but then the reservist in the Maglan, he's a sniper in a high commando unit. So there's over 300,000 reservists that came up, and they don't have things for them that they need. Do you know that there's enough money? Problem is, they can't get the goods. Can't find the things that they need. That's the difficulty. Why there's enough money? Of course we're going to give. Choose a giving and giving and giving.
What do you mean they can't get the goods?
Whatever it means, it means. Doesn't matter. Right. Whatever.
They received 50,000, but it's
Anyway.
not enough.
In any case, the point I'm bringing out is that the neshama of Klal Yisrael is a flame. It's amazing. It's beautiful, and that flame should stay and remain forevermore, because that's what's going to bring the final redemption of Mashiach now. TRC in 17 minutes. Thank you, folks, for joining. God bless you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much. Okay.